Olympic superstar Carl Lewis appeared on the February 3rd, 1992 episode of Later with Bob Costas. He discussed his track and field career, being the world's fastest human, and also being an incredible long jumper, and his battle with Michael Powell over breaking Bob Beeman's superhuman long jump in the '68 Olympics when he broke the record by something like 2 feet, and how long it took for other world-class guys to catch up to a perfect set of conditions for Beeman's jump. You know, perfect form, the altitude in Mexico City, whole ball wax led to a incredible athletic achievement that took a long time to eclipse. That was a real fascinating part of the conversation. Also great was Carl Lewis talking about Jessie Owens and not so much respecting him for winning all the gold medals in front of Hitler at the '36 Berlin Olympics, but for when Carl Lewis was an underachieving young kid long jumper, and Jessie Owens told him never give up, and Carl Lewis never did. So this is a great inspirational interview with an incredible athlete, Carl Lewis, on Later, February 3rd, 1992.
Thanks for staying up later. I guess there are a lot of ways to define who would be the world's greatest athlete, and there's no one definite choice, but you could not leave Carl Lewis's name off the short list of contenders. He has won 6 Olympic gold medals through the years, and of course he is presently the man entitled to be called the world's fastest human, which was a moniker that went to Bob Hayes and all the others through the years. And in Tokyo at the recent World Championships in August, you ran the 100 in 9.86. You hold the world record alone.
Well, it's, I tell you, it's been an incredible career so far. And this year has been the most bittersweet year because coming to Tokyo and not really knowing exactly what would happen, you know, not being favored essentially in any one of the events, it was special.
Yeah, I guess you would be no better than a co-favorite with Leroy Burrell in the 100-meter dash, and maybe he would have been accorded a slight edge because he was the world record holder coming in.
Right, he definitely was. I mean, Leroy was a world record holder, and he defeated me a few times before, so he without question was running the best going into that meet.
How confident were you?
Well, I knew that I was fast. I mean, I had some great relay legs. I had some great performances, but I just wasn't doing the things properly out of the blocks. You know, and mechanics in a competition is something you can correct rather quickly. Now, if you're just not running well, then that's it. But I felt that if we took the time and focused, I could be as ready as I could be in Tokyo.
Race to it with a quick start. Burrell is there. Mitchell is also running well, and Christie. Burrell with a short lead. Here comes Lewis. Carl Lewis! 9.86! New world record!
How exhilarating was it for you to be able to look back over your shoulder and see that you had beaten Burrell?
It was an incredible feeling because going in, I felt that I had to have the best time in every round. You know, the first, second, third, and fourth round in order to show the world and myself that I could be competitive. And going into the final, Leroy and I had a small talk, and we said, look, the winner's going to set the world record tonight. We knew it. And it's just, let's just go do it. And then, of course, we departed and went our own ways. And when I looked back over my shoulder, I knew that we had to break that record because of the time, and it was almost a numbing feeling because this was the time I felt my back was against the wall, being 30 years old and having been defeated by Leroy quite a bit. And then I was able to come through and pull that race off, and it was just the first race of 3 more competitions.
Now, you had been awarded the gold, of course, in Seoul in 1988 when Ben Jonhson was disqualified for steroid use, but you didn't have the fulfilling feeling of hitting the tape first.
Right.
So this is the pinnacle for you, at least to this point.
Oh, it definitely was. I mean, to set the world record and then to also go through it in a very positive note. Having Leroy as a teammate has been a positive influence because we can talk about our races, we can interact. We don't have the big, you know, mean man against mean man rivalries. It's very friendly, but it's very serious. And to go across the line and to win that at this stage of my career was incredible for me.
What happens when you see Ben Jonhson now? He was there in Tokyo, reduced to just running on the Canadian relay team, and he's not even the fastest man in his own country anymore. off steroids and out of competition for a couple of years, now trying to come back. What happens when you see him?
Well, it's interesting because he still has the same attitude. I mean, he's still kind of brassy and still won't shake my hand, but that's okay.
Really?
Yeah, it's still kind of at that point. But I hope that a lot of people that see him now and view his performances look at it as a means of not taking the drugs instead of saying, hey, look what the drugs did for him. I mean, because he's gone from the best in the world really down to the 4th or 5th best Canadian. And that's a long ways, obviously. And he couldn't even probably get out of the 2nd round at the World Championship meets.
Yeah, people forget that when he beat you, or at least appeared to beat you, with his time that was subsequently disqualified in Seoul in '88, you kind of forced your hand into his to congratulate him, and he barely made eye contact, and then
right, he didn't want to do it. It was a thing where I was beyond the point of no return, and I was refused to be embarrassed. So I said, "You're going to shake it if you don't want to or not." I walked over here. You're going to do it.
You think it'll take a world record to take the gold in Barcelona?
Well, it's funny because the day after that race, the first thing we started talking about is getting the record below the old world record, which was 9.83. Our objective is to get it below 9.83. And it was funny, I left and went back from Japan back home quick. So I said, I'm going to start training a little bit earlier and everything. And then Leroy came back from Europe a few weeks later. And next thing I know, I'm going out to the first day of practice, and he's out there doing the same thing. So we're starting in September. We started in September getting ready, and I think we're going to go into 8.3.
When you say 9.83, is that what Jonhson ran that was subsequently erased because
yes,
he was on steroids? And he ran 9.79 erased in Seoul in '88.
Right.
So obviously what you've got at 9.86 is the best legal time
yes,
that's ever,
right now.
that's ever
that's
been
right. And we
recorded.
feel that we can definitely go below 9.83 now.
This meet in Tokyo, I was privileged to be there, was one of the most remarkable track and field meets in history. Maybe, all things considered, the most remarkable. And for you, bittersweet, because you break the record in the 100 meters, but then you are beaten by Mike Powell in the long jump in a mind-boggling competition.
That's one that I'll never forget as well, because going in, I felt that I could jump 29.2. And after the 3rd jump, when I did jump out that far, it was just amazing for me. I was surprised at Mike's performance. I mean, the 29.4. It was positive for me because I jumped so well. I mean, I only had 2 meets all year, and I jumped so well. But then the competitiveness in me was wanted to win it. But, the athlete in me was very happy with it. So I think it's only going to make the event better. Mike is a good jumper, and he's been a great athlete. And I've said before that he's an incredible competitor. And I just think it's going to elevate the event.
Now, let's put this in perspective for those of you who don't follow track and field that closely. In 1968, at Mexico City, Bob Beamon went 29 feet, 2.5 inches. He broke the existing record by close to 2 feet. I mean, never in the history of track and field in any event had a record been broken by such a large margin. And again, to put in perspective what an aberration really it was, Beamon himself never jumped as far as 27 feet, even once thereafter. But all the conditions were right. Maximum allowable wind, altitude in Mexico City, the best single performance of his life in that one moment, almost superhuman. All the technique was perfect, and he soared 29.2.5. This record stood, it was the longest standing record in the history of track and field, stood since 1968, when other records were falling on an almost yearly basis. And you were creeping up on this thing, bit by bit, 28.10, 28.11, closer and closer. So if anybody was going to get it, it was going to be you. And you hadn't lost any long jump competition in 10 years. And you'd beaten Mike Powell head-to-head 15 times. And he finally beat you and set the world record in the process.
Well, it was that type of competition. I mean, Mike is different. I mean, I've competed against different long jumpers over the years, and Mike wanted the inspiration for him to beat me and to win, I think, was to be #1, whereas so many other athletes were focused on beating me because they wanted me to lose. And I think that was a difference. But it's going to change a little bit in me because I have to focus more time on it. Mike went into that competition more prepared. He had more long jumps under his belt, and he focused on that event, and that was a difference. I mean, he was more prepared. If I'm going to jump farther, I have to jump a little bit more and spend a little bit more time on that event.
Sometimes in sports, a moment will happen that sort of deflates what up until then had been a close competition. It's like a stake through the heart of one team or one competitor. Unexpected moment happens in a baseball game, and all of a sudden, what was close turns. You would think that when this guy jumps 29.4½, it's like a stake through your heart. But even though you didn't catch him, you still came close. You still jumped in the vicinity of 29 again 2 more times, right?
Well, it was for me, it was great. I mean, to come back after he jumped 29.4, the world record, to come back and jump 29 even in 29.1 and one of them into a headwind was great for me. I was very pleased.
No one counts him out of this competition. And another big jump for Lewis.
My coach, Coach Tellez, came up to me afterward and said, look, no matter what the deal is, I'm proud of you. You did a good job. And I was proud of my performance, and I respect Mike a lot. So it's funny now. I mean, it's 10 years, and I'm 65-1 and 15-1 against Mike. So it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off of me and puts, obviously, a lot of it on Mike. But still, a lot of people still come up to me and say, gosh, well, I still think you're the favorite. He just got the one jump off. But really, that doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. The whole picture is the fact that he did it, and he proves that he can do it. So I have to focus and look at him as someone that can jump 29.
Nobody denies that you had the greatest series of jumps in the history of long jumping. 29 feet had only been reached a handful of times or even approached, and you got right at it about 3 or 4 times in that one sequence. But nonetheless, he won. And a lot of people looked at your reaction immediately afterwards as not being sufficiently gracious. How did you feel about it?
Well, I mean, first of all, you know, it was a stirring competition. I mean, I was 2.5 inches away from the absolute perfect performance of all time. I mean, in a competition, 3 world records. You know, sometimes you think that people, I think, overjudge situations. I mean, I'm supposed to smile and be happy that I lost. You know, if you are, I watched the World Series, and, you know, when the losing team lost, I mean, their heads were down, and they were sad, and they wanted to come back next year. But people, I think certain people tried to judge me on a different plane. Of course, I accepted it, and Mike jumped well. And the long jump is a type of event where you can win it with one jump. You don't have to jump great, and that's the true essence of it. But I respect Mike a lot, and I think he's a great talent, a great athlete, and I've said that even before he jumped the world record, and I still believe that.
Back in 1984, you won 4 gold medals in the same 4 events that Jessie Owens had taken gold in 1936 in Berlin. You did it in Los Angeles, and from that moment on, your name was linked with Jessie Owens and will be forever. Are you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable more so now than I was at the beginning. I mean, the very beginning, it was great. I mean, to be linked to a Jessie Owens is incredible. And then I think we got to the point where people started comparing us off the field, which is impossible. I mean, you cannot compare someone's personal life or what they do off the track from the 30s than you can with someone from the 90s, and just totally different people. But now we've gotten back to the point where they've established me as who I am, and of course Jessie who he was, and then put our performances back in perspective on the track. So I'm very comfortable with that now. He was somebody that said something to me, and I was 9 years old, and it meant something to me all along. I mean, don't give up and stay in there and hang in there. He told a 9-year-old kid who was just an average little long jumper. And many people don't really know that's the Jessie Owens that I know, not the one that set 4 gold medals and set records, but the one that came to me as a big figure and made a difference in a young kid's life.
We've talked about this before, but never on this show, so I have to ask you to go through it again. When you didn't take the jumps in 1984, after you had won the gold, you'd gone far enough to take the competition, you had jumps left, you could have taken a crack at what then was Bob Beeman's record. Some people were disappointed that you didn't. In retrospect, do you wish you had jumped, taken the 2, even if they hadn't been successful, just to say, yeah, I did it, and now people can't criticize me for that?
Well, I guess we can look back and say, hey, it would have been easy to take 2 jumps and run through or whatever. But at the time, who would have imagined winning a gold medal wasn't good enough? You know, that was what it is. It's impossible to go back and say that I would have made a different decision. And now looking at 1987 and 1991 at the World Championships, now you see Mike got that 1 jump off in the 5th round. So now people can imagine what I was going through passing every jump, just saying, God, we got through another round, we got through another round. If I can look back, it would be easy to say yes. It would have been great to have taken all the jumps and gone through everything. But under the circumstances, it would have been impossible for me to make that decision because I had other events to go and I had a lot of races to go. And I know what the effects of that are now, but I didn't know then.
There was a time when you had difficulty with the media and maybe didn't handle it as well as you should have, and they misunderstood you or whatever. You think that's largely repaired now?
I say it's repaired. I mean, a lot of it, like I look at it, is misunderstanding. I've never been bitter about people. One thing I realize is that regardless of what we all do in life, we're going to be loved by some and disliked by some. I mean, that's something you can't change. It happens when you're 6 and it happens when you're 60. So I think people have got to know me. The sport has grown tremendously. I mean, track and field was just this little amateur sport before the Olympics, and the Olympics gave it a big boost, a bigger boost than all of us were able to handle at the time. But then as we've caught up and been able to progress and make the money and become a professional sport and treat it like that, I think the media has changed their perspective towards us. We've been able to work much better with them, and things have gotten much better. I mean, it's a lot of fun now where people take the time and come over and ask us questions before competitions and treat us like a football player gets treated or a basketball player gets treated. I mean, there's an interest instead of just running there, watching the meet, and then writing about it.
Wasn't there a perception, 84, 85, somewhere in there, that you were too handled, that they couldn't get to you as an individual, that maybe there were too many advisors around you or there was too much of a plan for how you'd be presented, and that made you appear less real to them and less accessible to them, and it worked to your disadvantage?
Well, you know, I looked at it, and this is just one thing that came from a reporter to kind of put it in perspective. One time I was shooting a commercial in '84, and someone asked me for an interview, just walked onto our track, and I was in the middle of this commercial, and they kept demanding and demanding, and we said, well, if you make a phone call, you can set up an interview. We're doing a commercial right now with the company. And it was a young lady, and she bleeped out, you have to give us an interview. You're an amateur. You have to. And at the time, of course, that didn't really mean that much, that statement. But I thought about it later. I said, wait a minute here. I mean, it isn't just being a professional athlete, but you're thought of, as an amateur, you're thought of someone who relishes any recognition you get. I mean, we need every 50 cents, so an interview makes a difference. And I just don't think, for reason of past experiences, people gave us the respect. And I understood from discussions and things what other athletes did, professionals and other sports, and we tried to follow some of the same lines because the Olympics for me was very difficult. I mean, trying 4 events in my first Olympic Games here in Los Angeles in the United States was not easy. And we tried to do some of the things that other professional sports did, and I think because of our sport was amateur and because people looked at it that way, we were judged differently. And that was really what I think rubbed everything in the beginning. And then, of course, I studied in the media, and I think it was a combination of things. And for me to say I was a perfect individual, no, I was not perfect. I mean, I was 22 years old at my first Olympics, and I was going for 4 gold medals, and everyone thought I would get it. And I was under a lot of pressure, too, as a young man. But now I'm 30 years old. I've matured as an individual in a lot of ways. I think people have watched me mature. They understand me better, and they're able to kind of look at it in a different perspective.
And we're back now with Carl Lewis, who, by the way, either for serious reasons or as a lark, was drafted in the 12th round by the Dallas Cowboys a few years ago and also was taken in the NBA draft by the Chicago Bulls. You ever think about team sports?
Well, I tell you, I talked to the Cowboys that year, and it was interesting because, of course, being a Texan, you know, and everyone said, Dallas Cowboys. It was a good experience. And I talked to them, and obviously my idea wasn't to go that direction, even though I love pro sports and I love football and basketball. But I just enjoyed having the pressure of having to do it yourself, you know, and train on your own and do it on your own. And the Bulls, I mean, we were just caught in a deadlock on the contract. I mean, I just demanded more than Jordan. They just couldn't see why. They couldn't understand it.
Well, since you mentioned Jordan, it brings up an interesting thing. Michael, of course, makes a fortune in endorsement revenues. And by and large, that enhances his image as well because people see him in his likable personality and whatnot. You're a nice-looking guy. You have an infectious smile. You're a well-spoken guy. You have lots of endorsements, I'm told, in Europe, and almost none here in the United States. Does that puzzle you?
Well, in a little way, but most cases, I mean, track and field is just getting the attention. That's why I think the way the World Championship meet was handled was incredible, because I've never come home from a track meet before, and just all types of people say, I watched your race and it was great. It wasn't just the fact of them seeing me, but them watching track and field. I mean, It was a different group of people. We're finally getting the attention where the public really knows who we are and understands it. And I think that things are going to get better. because there's so much competition now. If you talk about the Olympic Committee, they're out there fighting for dollars, and the TAC and all the governing bodies and all the professional athletes and professional sports. And then it just trickles down. I mean, there just isn't a lot of room left for a lot of people.
See, to me, trying to look at it dispassionately, and I've known you a little bit for a while, and you and I have gotten along well, so that makes me biased in your behalf. But trying to look at it objectively, you as you sit here talking to me, come across as a very down-to-earth guy. And yet there's a glamour about you. The way you dress, the way you carry yourself, there's a glamour. So the two almost seem to be on different tracks.
Right.
As you sit here and express yourself, you're like a guy at the candy store just shooting the breeze. But there's a certain different presence about Carl Lewis than other people that adds some glamour that some people may be attracted to and other people may be skeptical about.
Well, I accept that. When I was very young and in high school, I was extremely shy. I mean, I was just quiet. I was afraid of everybody, and I was very laid back. Then as I've gotten older, I was thrown out into the lions, you know, as an athlete. And I took radio, television, and I studied that in school, and I was able to kind of come out of that shell. What I do is, the one thing that helps me is that I don't take all of it so seriously. I mean, when you talk about the way you wear your hair or the clothes you wear or even competing, I mean, I have fun. I like to do it. I don't think it's so serious that it just has to be regimented. And I understand that as well. So that's why I can say that, you know, whether we have endorsements or not, whether I win a race or not, I'm still very happy.
Good to see you walking instead of running, slowing down long enough to spend half an hour with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good seeing you, Bob.
Carl Lewis, ladies and gentlemen. See you later.